So why and how did you come up with the methodology? Well, again, another good question. There are a couple of reasons why I came up with a methodology. Firstly, from a personal perspective, every now and then I would come across racial bias. Sometimes it's very subtle, and it obviously didn't have a massive impact on me because I've got a lot of business in the sectors that I work in. However, it was always there from time to time, and I would always struggle as to how to deal with it. So I was racking my brain for years, looking to see if I could find a way in which I could somehow deal with this bias. And the only thing that I could come up with was to call it out. But of course, you don't want to call it out because of the defensive fragility that you would come up against from the person or persons that you're calling it out to. So that was the first reason. The second reason is I've been exposed to unconscious bias training in the past. And what I've always found is that it tends to focus on the victim and victimhood and being sensitive to victims of unconscious bias. And how, if you're more sensitive to that, that awareness will impact the way that you behave. However, not enough attention, in my opinion, is allocated to equipping people to navigate unconscious bias on their own. Yeah, so empowering them to navigate unconscious bias in a way which doesn't invoke defensive fragility, but allows them to move on beyond it and continue their careers, as opposed to having to deal with it and stifling their careers. So this was really important to me. So I wanted to come at this from a place where I could give people skills that they could use to navigate unconscious bias on a day-to-day basis in the moment so that they can move on. And so that was the second reason. And then the third reason is just generally with diversity and inclusion solutions, I found that they were split up into or created a paradigm focused around guilty perpetrator and hapless victim. And I felt that this paradigm wasn't useful in terms of helping people deal with unconscious bias. In fact, the guilt paradigm, and maybe we'll talk about this later, the guilt paradigm was like I compare it to a nice glass of colorful Kool-Aid, which looks really nice initially and makes you really feel good and everybody feel better. And we all drink it. But at the end of it, there's a bitter aftertaste. And the bitter aftertaste is that it reinforces the problem that it was trying to correct in the first place. And from a victim perspective, they remain a victim. So I wanted to get away from this guilty perpetrator and hapless victim model. And this was one of the ways in which I felt we could definitely do that.